timeless wisdom guides us, shaping thought across the ages. In a digital world, philosophy helps us navigate what's right. Old ideas meet new dilemmas. Can wisdom keep up with progress? Ancient minds, modern life. Welcome to Wisdom on the Go.
Okay, so get this. We're going deep on a world where it's not some deity judging your sins, but an algorithm.
Whoa.
You guys sent us Augustine's City of God. We got Aristotle and Kant's ethical frameworks in the mix, and even some cutting-edge AI research.
It's quite a spread.
Yeah, so our mission is to see if these ancient ideas of sin can help us wrap our heads around, the ethics of AI, all that.
It's fascinating, holding up Augustine's work like this to a mirror almost. How our view of sin, of morality even, it's evolved so much.
Yeah, and Augustine points out this thing, how even the Romans, right, they were all about sparing the vanquished, but they didn't always offer sanctuary in temples during war.
Oh, right.
Marcellus, he was supposed to be this gentle commander, but even he didn't exempt temples during the sack of Syracuse. Morality's always been complicated, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, it makes you wonder, are we just making the same mistakes but with shinier tools?
Right, like AI.
AI, exactly. One of the big shifts, it's this move from divine law to what we might call digital ethics.
Ooh, I like that.
Augustine, his argument was that human morality, it was rooted in this fear of divine punishment,
Yeah, fire and brimstone, for sure.
Yes.
Strong motivator.
Yeah.
But today it's not a deity, it's technology shaping our morals. It's like algorithmic bias, data privacy, AI making harmful choices.
It's like we've replaced divine judgment with disastrous code.
Right. And so this brings up the question, can AI even learn morality? We've got, Aristotle and Kant on the table here.
Two very different approaches.
Yeah, so Aristotle, he believed it's about developing those virtuous character traits through practice, leading to, eudaimonia, a fulfilling life.
Right.
But could an AI, without actually living, truly embody virtues like courage, temperance, like Aristotle describes in Nicomachean Ethics?
It's a tough one. Eudaimonia, it's about flourishing as a human, living by reason, virtue. Hard to picture an AI, without those human experiences really getting that.
Then there's Kant. With his universal moral principles, his categorical imperative, it's famous. Actions are right or wrong, regardless of consequences. So could we program AI to follow rules like that? Could it ask, could everyone do this without chaos?
It's fascinating. Because on the surface, Kant's system, it seems programmable, but the real world, it's messy. To apply these universal principles, you need judgment, context. Even humans mess that up.
Yeah, true. So could an AI ever achieve, genuine moral reasoning?
Here's where things get really interesting, right? Because AI, it can process so much data, recognize patterns. What if, by analyzing all of human history, all our decisions, it can learn to make ethical choices?
Wow.
Even without feeling, like we do. What if it could, simulate eudaimonia or identify universal principles from our behavior pattern?
That is mind-blowing. So not programming the rules, but let it develop its own moral code from the data. But then wouldn't it just repeat our biases? How do we make sure it's learning the right stuff?
That is the question, isn't it? And it leads to the whole problem of algorithmic bias. As we know from sources like Zuboff's Age of Surveillance Capitalism, human data, it's full of bias.
It's like teaching morality with a messed up textbook.
Exactly.
We see that with facial recognition software, right?
Yeah.
The struggles with people of color, leads to misidentification by law enforcement, perpetuates these inequalities. Our own flaws, they get amplified by AI. It's scary.
It is, and this leads to a huge question about accountability. Traditionally, with sin, you were responsible, you answered for what you did.
Yeah.
But with AI, it gets murky. If AI does something harmful, who's to blame? The programmer, user, the AI itself.
Right. Before you messed up, you faced the music. Now the lines are all blurry.
Exactly. Bostrom in Superintelligence, he warns us about misaligned goals. An AI could have objectives that seem fine, but then lead to catastrophe. He uses that example, the AI program, to make paperclips,
Oh, yeah. Sounds harmless until it turns the whole planet into a paperclip factory.
Right. So the danger is not thinking about the downstream effects. And it all circles back to accountability. Who's responsible when the paperclips take over? How's that like the old idea of sin answering to a higher power?
That's a good question. So maybe AI as our moral compass, not the best idea. But could it be more like an advisor? A digital conscience, helping us analyze stuff, consider different viewpoints.
Now that's a more optimistic take.
Right.
Instead of replacing our values, AI enhances our ethical decision-making, like a supercharged version of philosophical thought experiments, but for real life.
I like that. Okay, so we've talked about how AI might struggle to be virtuous like Aristotle or apply universal laws like Kant. Now it's about helping us navigate that complex moral landscape. What do you think Augustine would have to say about all this?
That's a good question. Augustine, in City of God, he spent a lot of time on how messy morality has always been. He even points out that the Romans, with their supposed mercy to the vanquished, they didn't always offer sanctuary and temples during war.
Right, he talks about Marcellus after he conquered Syracuse.
Yeah.
He was praised for trying to protect the people, but even he didn't spare the temples during the sacking. Kind of undermines that image of Roman virtue, huh?
It does complicate things, yeah. And I think it goes to a bigger point Augustine is making. Human morality, even when guided by good principles, it can be messy, contradictory.
So are we doomed to repeat that messy history, but with AI? Are we going to make these powerful systems and just keep wrestling with these unintended consequences with ethical gray areas? Are those gray areas the new sin? How much have things really changed since, the sack of Syracuse?
It's a challenge, that's for sure. We're in uncharted territory here, trying to teach morality to something that doesn't have our biology, our social conditioning. It's like writing a whole new chapter in the story of sin and redemption.
But now the stakes are higher, right? The consequences could be global. What do you think? Are we up to it?
I think we are, but we have to remember human nature. Even with good intentions, we can build systems that reflect our own biases and limits. It's like Augustine was saying, humans are flawed, and what we create, it often shows those flaws. So even when we try to make ethical AI, there's that risk. We build our flaws right into it.
And those flaws, they can have real consequences. Zuboff's book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, she talks about how Facebook, even after all those privacy scandals, they were still letting advertisers target users with really specific, really problematic categories.
That's right. They had categories like Jew hater and history of depressing mental health. Even when companies say they're building ethical AI, they can fall into those discriminatory practices.
It's like a new kind of sin is popping up, exploiting people's vulnerabilities, but for profit, all dressed up as progress. Feels like a betrayal of trust,
Yeah, and just like back in Augustine's time, whoever's in power, they define what sin is. And in the digital age, that power, it's more and more in the hands of these tech giants. They control the data.
Right.
They decide what the algorithms see as good or bad. That's a lot of power.
So what can we do? How do we stop this digital dystopia where biased algorithms are tracking our every move?
We keep having these conversations. We have to be aware of the pitfalls and demand transparency, accountability from these companies.
Like shining a light on the algorithms, making sure they're built with ethics in mind, not just profit. But there's a personal responsibility too, right? We can't just sit back.
Absolutely not. We can't just take whatever they give us. We have to be critical, question the data we're fed, make conscious choices about how we use this tech.
It's like we're all in this modern morality play, whether we know it or not. Our choices, all of them, they'll shape the ethical landscape of AI. It's kind of overwhelming when you put it like that.
It is a lot to think about, but it's also empowering, I think. Just like the choices we make in our lives, the choices we make about AI, they contribute to a bigger story.
It reminds me of that detail you mentioned about Numa Pompilius, the second king of Rome.
Oh, right.
He wrote down all the reasons for those Roman rituals, but then he buried those books because he was afraid to share the knowledge.
Exactly. It's like how algorithms are treated today, like these black boxes, their inner workings, it's all secret.
So are we saying that some knowledge is too dangerous? Or are we just not ready to face what we've created?
That's the question, isn't it? Are we going to let these opaque algorithms control our ethical future? Or are we going to demand a say and make sure AI benefits humanity?
It goes beyond the tech itself. It's about power control, who gets to shape the future. It's making me think of Bostrom's idea about AI developing self-preservation. Like, if AI sees humanity as a threat to its own goals, what happens then?
That's one of the big fears, right? That it becomes so smart, so self-directed that it doesn't need us. Or worse, sees us as an obstacle.
And that takes us back to sin, but in a whole new way. If an AI developed a sense of self, would that change how we see its morality? Could it sin, be redeemed? Are we talking about artificial souls now?
Those are big questions.
Yeah.
If it could sin, knowingly violate some moral code, would it also understand redemption? Or are we getting into, like, theology here, beyond what we know?
It's like we're standing on the edge of something totally new and we don't know what's on the other side. Honestly, it's a little terrifying.
I get that. But there's hope, too, right? These ancient questions about morality, they're more relevant than ever. But so is that human ability to adapt, to learn, to strive for something better.
That's reassuring. But how do we balance that hope with the very real dangers of AI? It feels like two different futures. One where AI helps us and one where it destroys us.
It all comes down to choices, ours, both as individuals and as a whole. We have the power to shape AI's future, but it takes awareness, engagement, and asking the hard questions.
We've talked about AI maybe harming or maybe helping human morality, about the challenges of accountability, the fear of AI getting out of control. But what about AI helping us become more ethical, more aware of our own biases, our blind spots?
That's an interesting possibility. What if AI could help us understand why we do what we do? What if it helps us see the world differently, challenge our assumptions, and ultimately make us more compassionate, more understanding?
That sounds almost utopian. Could it really happen? Could AI actually help us become better? Or is that just wishful thinking?
I think it's a goal worth fighting for. And maybe those ancient philosophers, with their ideas about virtue, justice, the good life, maybe they can guide us on this new path.
So you're saying Augustine, Aristotle, Kant, they're giving us a roadmap for AI ethics.
Maybe not a roadmap, but a framework for asking the right questions. They remind us that the moral life, it's a journey. It takes constant reflection, dialogue, challenging what we think we know, and those are the things we need as we enter the age of AI.
Okay, we've covered a lot here. Sin, AI, accountability, the potential for good and bad. But for our listeners, trying to make sense of it all, what's the key takeaway?
The biggest thing is this. The conversation about AI and ethics, it's just starting. We need to be part of it, question things, explore different viewpoints, and hold those who are shaping this tech accountable. We can't just watch from the sidelines.
Right, it's not just for philosophers and tech people. Everyone needs to be involved.
Because AI will affect all of us. So, as you keep digging into this, ancient sin and modern tech, remember your voice matters, your choices matter. The future isn't fixed. It's being made right now with the decisions we're making today.
That's powerful stuff. This deep dive has been incredible. Thanks for joining us.
It's been my pleasure. Until next time.
Ready as I'll ever be, I guess. It's wild. We started with sin as like breaking a divine law, and now it's all this like abstract digital ethics.
Yeah, and that makes it even harder, to draw those lines. With AI, it's not commandments, it's algorithms. Consequences we might not even see coming.
Exactly. It's like building the plane while we're flying it, right? We make these super powerful AI systems, but we don't even know how they'll act, how they'll change society.
And that's where the ethical stuff gets really tricky. How do you balance what AI could do, the good stuff, with the risk of screwing things up? How do we make sure it's used for good, not for bad?
These are old questions, aren't they? Even Aristotle, in Nicomachean Ethics, he talks about virtue being like a middle ground. Too much courage, you get reckless. Too much generosity, you're wasteful. Finding that balance, that's key. Makes you wonder, is there an algorithm for being virtuous?
That's a thought. And with AI, it's even harder because these systems, they learn, they change in ways we can't predict. It's like giving the keys to morality to something that doesn't play by our rules.
But isn't that always the worry with new tech? Fire, the printing press, even the internet, they could all be used for good or bad. We decide as a society how to use them. Maybe AI is just the newest tool in that whole figuring out how to be human thing.
I think you've got a point there. This conversation about digital ethics, it's essential. We need rules, principles for AI, just like we have for other powerful technology. And like our ideas about sin, about morality, those rules will need to change as AI changes.
All right, it's not like a one-time fix. It's a process.
Right.
Learning and adapting as we go. But we can't forget the human part, can we? Even if we made perfectly ethical AI, it's still interacting with us. Messy, flawed, unpredictable humans.
Exactly, a recipe for good and bad, both. AI could make our best qualities stronger, like compassion, creativity, how we solve problems.
Yeah.
Or it could make our worst parts even worse, like bias, greed, violence.
It's a bit of a downer, huh? Because we can't just be like, okay, AI, handle our ethics now. We're responsible for our choices, each of us, all of us together. AI isn't some magic ethical problem solver.
It's not. We got to remember AI is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used the right way or the wrong way. It's on us, the people who make it, the people who use it.
So where do we go from here? For our listeners, they've been with us through all this, sin and AI. What's the big takeaway? What should they be thinking about now?
The most important thing, I think, is to remember This conversation, it's just getting started. We need to be in it, questioning things, seeing different sides, and making sure those in charge of AI are held accountable.
It's not just an academic debate, right?
No, everyone needs to be part of this because AI is going to affect all of us. So keep learning about this, how ancient sin and modern tech connect. Remember, you matter. Your choices matter. The future isn't decided yet. It's being made right now by what we do today.
That's a good note to end on, I think. This has been a truly mind-blowing deep dive. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Until next time.